Good morning, everyone, to the Powerhead Colorado Technical Committee. Glad to see all of you. I'm going to ask Cam to do a call to order, please.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So as far as members and alternates in attendance, I see Chair Susie Strife, Adam Sanderson, Amanda Perkins, Bridger Tomlin, Flo Rotano, Jeff Wong, Jonathan Conan, Melody Mascarenez, Sergio Cordova, Holly Harris, Shannon Yawn, Brooke Pike. And those are all the members I see at this time, Madam Chair. Back to you.
Fabulous. And also, please run public comment, Cam.
Okay, I will give it a second to see if anyone has any questions. Please raise your hand. Going once. Okay, back to you.
Great. Thank you. Okay, we're going to ask for any comments on the meeting summary from December 2nd, which was our Powerhead Colorado Technical Committee, and that's attachment A. There were a lot of discussion items at that point, so curious if there are any comments on the meeting summary. Okay, I'm not seeing any, so we can move to the official agenda, item number 4, Jurisdictional Support Program, Round 2, and we have a presentation from Greg. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mm, Good to be with everyone again. It feels like it's been a while. Just as a reminder, my name is Greg Meow. I am the program manager for the Building Policy Collaborative, and I'm going to start sharing my screen in one sec. Uh, all right, is that coming through for everyone? Perfect. So we're here today to talk a little bit more about the subaward program, which is one of the aspects of the BPC. And this is the money that we pass through as subawards to our jurisdictions to support them in their policy adoption and implementation efforts. So we're going to go over quickly what round one results looked like as a reminder, kind of what the overall goals of the program are. And then we'll jump into kind of how we've been thinking about round two. So as a reminder, the subaward program really is intended to help help us get our jurisdictions to participate in the BPC. And really was the first round is really oriented towards supporting jurisdictional capacity to adopt and implement building policies. And really what that meant was, staff, new staff, expanding sort of sustainability departments, supplementing building department staff, really to make sure that, we've got robust implementation of our building decarbonization policies. And this is really intended to sort of support the rest of the work of the program, bringing that regulatory arm to the other market transformation efforts to really just change the way that business is done across the region. Um, so just to provide a quick update of what happened in round one. So round one closed, I think at the end of September of last year. We are currently in the process of finalizing all the contracts, but ultimately we had 27 jurisdictions that we awarded subawards to. That is 42% of the number of jurisdictions that were eligible for this award, but it does represent 85% of the population of the DRCOG region. Of the initial $34.8 million that we had budgeted towards the subaward program, we obligated $26 million of that. So we obligated roughly 75% of the total funds we had budgeted for the subaward program in the first round, which I think, to us was a real success. I was candidly hoping for kind of high 60s, so breaking that 70% barrier was great. Most of the applications were for the formula amounts of over $300,000. As a reminder, those formula awards ranged from $50,000 to $2 million. And we had most of our participation amongst those jurisdictions that had higher award eligibility. And we did have a couple of successful partnership applications, which we were hoping to see, including from North Glen and Superior for energy code support, as well as for Englewood and Sheridan, knowing that they have a lot of practice working together. In terms of the usage of the funds, as you can see from this graph, the vast majority of applications, not all of them, but almost all of them, included budget for staff capacity, which is really great. I mean, I think that's what we'd heard in our workshops as the biggest need, and it certainly panned out within the first round of the applications. You know, quickly after that, almost all, most applications included some technical assistance for, local modeling or local supportive policy adoption. A lot of people went for training and certification to, kind of pair with staff capacity to make sure that, new staff and existing staff, have received the training they need. And then, I think I was also really happy to see that, we were trying to encourage most of our jurisdictions to include community engagement, or I would say locally led community engagement efforts on for the specific policies that we're hoping they'll be adopting, knowing that there are some limitations to the rest of the program's ability to kind of get that granular, supporting individual ordinances, and individual jurisdictions. And lastly, almost half of folks did go for some form of permitting or system support. Here's another sort of breakdown of the specific policies people identified that they were interested in pursuing within the round one applications. So we have 59% of jurisdictions working on energy code implementation, such as new construction policies. And you can see those are in the lighter blue, where kind of you can see sort of the distribution of what new construction policy folks are going towards. Most sticking with the 2024 IUCC, which is the current state minimum. But thankfully, and I was excited to see a number had also elected to pursue this more advanced MLECC, which will be the new state minimum as of July. And a few went even above and beyond that with the sort of Northwest Metro Code cohort or towards a full net zero construction policies. You can also see that 74% of jurisdictions indicated they wanted to work on policies to address emissions from existing buildings. So the distribution you can see in the dark blue, fairly large number working towards benchmarking policies as well as BPS policies. And then a number also really interested in residential transparency policies, with a smaller amount working on equipment standards. So that's sort of a preview of the next conversation that I'll be leading with regards to the roadmap. But that's sort of the policy impetus, I would say, that's reflected within the subaward applications. And this is sort of a final breakdown quickly of just what what communities are doing, elected into which of the different eligible uses. So just by total, you can see, Adams County was very ambitious and decided they wanted to do everything. I think they're in every single one of these categories. Other groups were a little more targeted, but we're happy to support everyone doing all of those different measures. So I'll pause quickly to see if there's any questions about what happened in round one before we talk a little bit about round two. Okay. Seeing none, I will continue on, and we can always revisit the round one after I finish the presentation. So with round two, we have $8.5 million remaining in what we budgeted for the subawards. And here are sort of the goals that we identified as staff based on our initial conversations with the technical committee, oversight committee, and just feedback from participating local government staff in the BPC. I think our goals here are a little bit different than round one. We wanted to stick with trying to prioritize bread and butter, um, eligible uses that we had in round one, but we also wanted to provide additional services at the regional level, and really with an orientation in trying to do that at the most cost-effective manner, in the least sort of burdensome manner. We also heard that there's a lot of need to sort of provide our jurisdictions with more support in terms of understanding how to engage with their utilities, and perhaps also in coordinating their engagement with utilities, whether that's with regards to understanding how best to um, approach their franchise agreements, to weighing in on any ongoing regulatory efforts at the Utility Commission. Um, Again, I said we wanted to incentivize new participation from those jurisdictions that we didn't have participating, um, and build on that regional momentum on the core policies that we kind of discussed just on the previous slides. We also wanted to increase the impact of the subaward, increase the impact of the subawards for existing awardees. And by that, I mean really trying to design the second subaward opportunity around kind of things that people weren't able to include in their formula applications, but that would make really significant um, implementation. So it would be really significant implementation supports moving forward. And then fourth, we wanted to expand the opportunity a little bit to allow for slightly more innovative and ambitious projects, knowing that this is a competitive process. We wanted to make sure that we allowed people to kind of push the envelope just a little bit. So before we go into too deeply into the specific design parameters that we are proposing for round two, I did want to talk a little bit more about proposed additional regional services that we are proposing to provide as DRCOG and Powerhead Colorado to our jurisdictions, utilizing some of the budget that we had previously set aside for the subawards. So as I mentioned, there's $8.5 million remaining in that budget, and we're proposing to set aside $2 million of that budget to provide sort of aggregate regional services, really in response to requests from our local governments. So the bullets you can see are kind of what the key services are that have been identified to date. There's been a request for additional support and budget to be added to our facilitation contract with Lotus to be able to facilitate additional working groups to provide that collaborative coordination space for our jurisdictions to coordinate on better building official engagement, some of that utility engagement, and potentially to explore other issues in the future, around collaborative approaches on addressing embodied carbon or refrigerant emissions, things that might sort of build on the existing work that we've already started within that peer network structure. Another thing that's been identified again was coordinated utility support for utility engagement. The idea here would be for us to potentially bring on another staff within the Powerhead Colorado structure to really provide a point person to attend Utility Commission proceedings and really help the majority of our jurisdictions that don't have a regular presence at at the Utility Commission to help keep them up to date on what's happening, and help provide a voice for those jurisdictions in those proceedings. So we're still working on fleshing out what the full work plan of that might be, but really I think it was identified that we only have a few of our jurisdictions that have the capacity to regularly interact with the utility commission, and it is a pretty big gap. And I think a lot of our jurisdictions have identified being caught a little bit by surprise or on the back foot when it comes to their franchise agreements and not feeling like they have a lot of say into what that looks like and how best to coordinate with their utilities to make sure that infrastructure improvements are going in the right manner. So we're hoping to sort of help bridge that gap a little bit with this funding. And then the last item that was really identified for, that as a service DRCOG could provide would be to support the standing up a regional or statewide home energy score policy. So that is the residential transparency policy that I discussed earlier. And really the policy itself is the equivalent of EPA gas mileage rating for single-family homes. And it would be a policy that we're hoping to support our jurisdictions in adopting that requires that all homes that go up for sale have a home energy score done and that score be posted in some manner prior to the listing of that property so that any prospective homeowners can better understand how much energy is being burned by a building before they purchase it, and they can incorporate that into their home buying decision-making process. So that's a little bit about what that policy is. There's already a pilot group that's being facilitated by the state and that we are participating in that is exploring kind of the general policy parameters. And that will dovetail with ongoing policy work or policy work to come this spring by the BPC. But there's about 8 jurisdictions right now that are interested or already participating in that pilot, and I think we've got a fair number more within the BPC that are interested in pursuing it. And there's a number of back-end services, including database management, auditing, or doing some workforce training, sort of quality assurance on those the inspections or the home energy scores that may make more sense to administer through a regional contract rather than individually by each jurisdiction. So those are the 3 primary services that we would be interested in providing to our jurisdictions utilizing these funds. Again, this really has come I think, out of the conversations with the committees and with our jurisdictions. But before I go too deeply into the rest of the subaward design, I would love to pause here for questions and comments.
Thanks, Greg. I do have just a comment and a question. I think it's super exciting that this group of communities would be represented by a coordinated utility engagement liaison, if you will. I do get curious about how that would work and the interaction with local jurisdictions like City of Boulder that have been after this for a long time or communities for climate action that have tried to sort of support utility work as well. Would there be some type of subcommittee I guess could you share just a tiny bit more about the vision there? I think it's so important. So I'm just so pleased to see this. And then what type of skill set you would be looking for? Is this kind of an attorney level, a PUC expert? Anyway, I just would love to hear more because I think this is so important and woefully over needed.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're still in the scoping phase of exactly how we'd structure this. I will say, we've had conversations where I don't think our intent would be to hire an attorney specifically to actively, engage in those proceedings. I do think we would want to. I think the gap that we're really trying to address here is, for all the jurisdictions that just don't have the capacity to engage in proceedings right now. So I think it'd be more of a liaison, uh, utility expert. I think the role of the BPC relative to this and of like our committees is something that we're um, excited to kind of flesh out a little bit more. But I think we are interested in helping, you know, utilize things like our research budget to help provide some of those, even if we're not necessarily cross-examining experts, provide sort of expert, um, not quite testimony to, but weight of voice as well as sort of the aggregate, um, represent to the commission the level of concern that this raises to amongst sort of the, you know, amongst our members, which is the, majority of many of our utilities service areas. So I think that, we haven't fully gone down this path to fully structure out exactly what it would look like. But one of the things we are doing right now is we have um, added additional budget or sort of moved some budget within our work with Lotus to explore exactly what a work plan should look like. So to do the full gap analysis um, you know, for our utilities, between our jurisdictions and our utilities and kind of come up with here's our recommendation in terms of, you know, what level of staff we need, what their role is relative to the jurisdictions, and, to your first question, how we would coordinate with all of the existing, either existing jurisdictions that do participate or, other advocacy organizations that participate in that space.
Thank you so much. That sounds so important and very exciting. Jeff?
I just wanted to add a +1 to your comment, Susie. Um, we've been struggling with utility engagement at the PUC level for quite a while. So seeing this is great for us in Lakewood. I think out of those three things, that would be our highest priority as well. And uh, just having a level of awareness is a big deal for us. We're having a hard time tracking what's going on at the PUC level. So I think advocacy is great, but just even having awareness of what's going on and how it will impact this program in particular, anything going on with proceedings is a big benefit. So appreciate that you guys are considering this.
Wonderful. Doesn't look like anyone else's hands are raised. Greg, do you want to keep moving or are we going to the next
Sure.
agenda item? Okay.
Thank you, Susie. I'll keep going. So we wanted to begin this conversation around that set aside or reservation of budget because it obviously has impacts for the amount and the size and how we would run the distribution of the remaining funds. And so just to emphasize on this point that these are just suggestions. We have not budgeted out or fully allocated or scoped exactly what the services here would be. But before we went too deep down that road, we wanted to raise the possibility of, reserving some of the money so that, we as a program could provide aggregate regional services to our jurisdictions.
Well, I'll just say that those categories that you've selected are very, very important for regional work, and it just makes sense to have a centralized opportunity for all of us to engage on the right platform with you all. And I just really appreciate the thought that's gone into that because we can do everything isolated on our own. And it's hard to do with limited resources, or you can be strategic and offer those services for us and with us. And I think the ones that you've selected are really great. It makes sense.
I really appreciate that feedback. And it really, all those ideas came from our jurisdictions in the first place. So it's just a nice little feedback loop we have. So in terms of the round two, how we're planning or what we'd like to do with round two, What we've done is start to identify, because this is going to be a competitive process, some potential new eligible uses to address some of the challenges that I think we ran into in round one. So some of the eligible uses that we've been considering include supporting non-capital costs associated with demonstration projects. And really, this bullet is intended to try to help incentivize maybe some participation from our smaller jurisdictions or jurisdictions that aren't quite at the political level of fully being able to adopt the policy, but would be could do would be interested in maybe developing a municipal electrification plan that they could use to demonstrate the impact of the electrification policies and the technology within their community. So in that sense, this would be maybe for some of the smaller jurisdictions that just need a little more groundwork to help sort of build that public buy-in to the work we're doing. We pulled out permitting again as something we wanted to really emphasize because it's something that routinely comes up in our conversations with our contractors. Is to try to make sure that we're encouraging our jurisdictions to try to look deeply at what their permitting, and regulatory processes look like to make sure that we're debiasing electrical equipment, and that we're able to really make sure that as we're trying to support the installation of this equipment, we're easing that process as much as possible, certainly at least relative to the gas equivalents. A third new eligible use would be participant support costs to incentivize compliance with new buildings. The thought here is that we would have to coordinate more closely with MAX program in particular in terms of what we're subsidizing as a program, but that jurisdictions, particularly as they begin adopting or maybe moving from benchmarking policies to BPS, may be interested in adding or budgeting for some subsidies to incentivize or to help covered buildings get the audits necessary to make the improvements, especially since a number of the priority focus of our BPS is really likely targeted towards the smaller buildings, smaller building sizes ranging anywhere from 10 to 50,000 square feet. If a jurisdiction is interested in passing that policy, they might want to add some budget to help those building owners comply with the BPS. And then the other new eligible uses that we're considering adding include the policy and program costs sort of necessary to address preconditions or negative externalities associated with advancing building efficiency and electrification. This really, we're talking about maybe integrating sort of the work necessary to make sure that any new electrification policy is well integrated into, let's say, or coordinated with a local tenant protections ordinance or anti-displacement policy, to make sure that the jurisdictions that want to get down to that very tangible point have budget to be able to do so, right? And I think we all know that there are potential challenges with our policies, and we want to make sure that jurisdictions are thinking through those policies, and whether it's an electrification policy or not, are developing the right kinds of responses to address some of the negative consequences that may come with our policies. So that's another eligible use. And then the last one we're recommending would be costs associated with exploring other building electrification, transition, and fully electric building resiliency policies. So maybe being specific and understanding that there's a lot of concern at the public level around resiliency and building electrification. This may be an area where we would allow a jurisdiction to support, to figure out, is there anything they could do to support balcony solar or something else that might be a resiliency response to the electrification concerns associated with our policies. So those are the new uses that we're thinking of. And here's the funding tiers. So we're thinking of having a 3-tiered structure for this subaward program with a $250,000 tier, $500,000, and $750,000 tier. The new elevated minimum is basically just that we heard that $50,000 was just not enough to incentivize our smaller jurisdictions to participate. And really also that the primary, what we heard from our jurisdictions is that, oh, we really wish we could have just had $300,000 more, a couple $100,000 more to do that one other thing that we did not include in our first application. And so that is really kind of what I would expect the majority of applications to come in at, and really would probably be the priority for how we would do the distribution amongst the tiers. But we also wanted to include the larger tiers to allow for some funding for staff, for additional staffing if it continues to be a need, as well as for those new applicants who might need some staffing to come in, as well as to allow for some of those more innovative and ambitious applications. And so in terms of what that means, I guess we should say that the award size would be a range of up to 250, up to 500, and up to 750. And this is sort of just, we could play with the math in a number of different ways, but we wanted to share with this group how far that $6.5 million could actually go. So if everyone came in at minimum tier size, we still have enough money within the $6.5 million to make up to 34 additional subawards, which candidly is not my goal, but would be great if we do. It'd just be a lot of contracting. But just to say that there's a lot of, we have the potential to make a lot of additional awards. And so I do think there's plenty of space here to have a robust applicant pool and really do the matchmaking necessary during the application process to make sure that we are distributing the funds in the best manner possible. In terms of the eligibility criteria, we would just keep using the same eligibility criteria as round one. For anyone who is an existing applicant, we wouldn't require an additional letter of commitment. So again, trying to keep this as easy as possible for our jurisdictions to apply to. All of the same existing eligible uses plus the new eligible uses I identified before. A very similar application process. Essentially just a narrative application with the project budget and timeline, and a letter of commitment for those that are new participants. We would love these applications to reference for existing awardees to reference back to their existing award and talk about how they're building on that. But that's basically the only difference. In terms of how we plan on administering this, we're suggesting that the following scoring criteria that allow us to kind of balance the new participation imperative that we have and funding the kind of bread and butter work that we want our jurisdictions to be doing with some of that, those new, allowing for new and more innovative applications and ideas. So the scoring criteria would be 15% to the overall quality of application, 10% to the established stakeholder support and collaboration, feasibility 20%, innovation 15%, sustained impact 20%, and demonstrated need or new participation 20%. And then in doing the scoring, we plan on establishing a review committee of DRCOG staff and local governments, with the sort of caveat that we would be limiting local government participation or recommending limiting local government participation to those that are not applying to a competitive process. So that there would be no other sort of conflicts there. And then we would bring recommended projects for consideration by the technical committee in July. So the timeline for the subaward opportunity, we're hoping, is to get committee and board approval of the sort of round two policy parameters in March, that we would open round two in April 1st. We would have a webinar shortly thereafter to help sort of support jurisdictions in making their applications. It would be open for roughly 60 days till the end of May. We would do our committee review and scoring of the applications in June, bring those recommendations then to the technical committee and the board in July, and then hopefully begin contracting in August. And on that last point, I will just say our hope is likely that we would amend any existing awardees contracts to include any round two subawards, so that any awardee would only have to, we'd only do grant management for any awardee once. All right, and that is all I have on my discussion.
Thanks, Greg. Wonderful presentation. Any questions? That was a lot. So questions, comments, curiosities? Jeff?
Hi. We had previously asked DRCOG if you might consider allowing round two funds to be used for municipal projects, so not necessarily community-wide buildings, but municipal buildings. I'm wondering if you have made a decision on whether that would be an eligible use. Specifically, we were considering, potential electrification studies or decarbonization studies for our own facilities here in Lakewood. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, I think that was included or is intended to be included in the sort of demonstration project space. Our goal, or I think the continued guidance on that, would be that our hope is not to just fund electrification studies of buildings, but have those studies or that work serve a broader, I think, community buy-in or education sort of goal, so that ideally, an application that would come in there would involve some community engagement processes, and that those would be demonstration projects, showing municipal leadership to residents, and it would be positioned kind of as such. Not, I guess what I'm saying is we don't really want to fund feasibility studies, but we do want to fund demonstration projects.
Great, thank you. Robert?
Yeah, I just wanted to hop in and say that this discussion is, we're not trying to force anything on you. This is a discussion that is still open to you all. We've kind of taken what we've heard over from the past TC meeting and our stakeholders and assimilated that the best we could, but this is still an opportunity for input. So Jeff, thanks for the initial comment, but if there's anything you're not seeing or that we're missing, now is really the time, because we're going to come back to you next month to have a policy all packaged up that will go through the process Greg just described. So don't be shy right now is all I wanted to say, really.
Thanks, Robert. Amanda?
Hi, I just wanted to say how happy I am to see that this second round will be as easy as possible for jurisdictions and just keeping that administrative burden on the lighter side. I think that will really encourage a lot of jurisdictions to go for the second round. And then hopping back to Susie and Jeff's comments before, I really am happy to see the strategic work that DRCOG is considering providing. I think that will be a really big benefit, and especially in the PUC world.
Thanks, Amanda. I have a curiosity. Are there limitations on how much PUC engagement or policy work you are allowed to do with your funding agreement and EPA?
Yeah, I'd suggest anything that comes even close to lobbying, we're not allowed to do. It really would just be about kind of, frankly, just being aware for both our programs and the local governments, what is happening on the PUC. There might be some times we bring some things back to our board for consideration on weighing in on, but we would not be doing any kind of direct lobbying.
That makes sense. Thank you. Other thoughts, questions, curiosities about Greg's presentation and round two? Okay, Greg, you're still in the hot seat with agenda item number 5. You're going to introduce the Building Policy Collaborative Roadmap. And for folks following along, that's attachment C. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I will. Yeah, let's keep going. Happy to be here again to talk a little bit about the roadmap, which is something I'm really excited about myself, and really sort of passionate about. Because I think what it is it's really the first attempt by our program to kind of build on all of the work that's happened within the PCAP and the CCAP to like make a very tangible strategic document that really is trying to build our regional alignment in the policy world. So what we'll be bringing to you today, and I'll start sharing in just a minute, is just a preview of the BPC roadmap, which is something that we've been working on with members of the BPC, and should have a draft to you all for review, hopefully in the coming month or so. So as I said, what we're trying to do is establish a regional vision for what our buildings look like. And what we've done through our work with the BPC is to try to, identify what that is. And to us, that is a region where buildings are efficient, comfortable, affordable, resilient, and eliminate, energy-related pollution. And we think that those benefits are really possible with quality construction and building upgrades guided by, the following 4 principles: reducing energy waste with good insulation and air leakage prevention, using efficient and right-sized electric equipment and appliances, and encouraging the phasing out of fuel burning by 2050, using smart energy systems to store and strategically manage energy, and shifting demand on the grid, and powering buildings with clean electricity, either from the grid or from on-site renewables. So what is the roadmap then? The roadmap is really, as I said, builds on the CCAP and MetroVision and the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy to set that vision or articulate that vision of what we want our buildings to look like, and then begin that process of identifying, well, how are we going to get there? What are the steps we need to do as a region to get there? So it's a visionary long-range planning document similar to like a Vision Zero plan. And it sets a vision for how local governments can, set expectations for buildings to reach and meet the region's environmental goals while also protecting, health and addressing the affordability concerns that people have. It describes near and long-term policy measures to reduce pollution and enhance efficiency of new construction and existing buildings. And it was prepared by us in partnership with local staff and elected leadership to really expand upon and accelerate and celebrate a lot of the good work that's already happened at the local level in the state and across the Front Range. The roadmap really, articulates this. What I'm going into now is sort of a high-level overview of different sections of the roadmap and an articulation of sort of why do we need it and where are we going with it. I want to preface this by saying the goal of the roadmap is really to be a tool for local staff and DRCOG to engage with elected leaders and the public in the future, over the course of the next year and in support of actual individual policy adoption to kind of build buy-in and regional momentum towards fulfilling that vision. So the roadmap, it articulates why do we need one. It identifies pollution from buildings being a major contributing factor to the climate changes experienced by the region. It identifies the challenge of having an inconsistent regulatory framework at the local level being very challenging in both accomplishing our goals, but also creating complexity for, our contractors, building owners, residents across the region. And really, the roadmap is intended to be a resource for local governments to align their efforts with other state and utility-led market transformation efforts underway as well. So our roadmap establishes a vision for steadily reducing pollution from buildings in a manner that improves health and addresses those affordability concerns. It communicates why working to reduce pollution from buildings is important, timely, and achievable. And then it highlights the building policy options for new construction in existing buildings that will provide that pathway for DRCOG communities to meet that vision. And it really will we hope it fosters alignment, education, and action across local governments, industry, and community organizations, and the public to support the adoption and implementation of the policies that we need to meet that vision. So the policy roadmap is not an articulation of specific policies that we want every jurisdiction to adopt. So we are not saying everyone needs to adopt the Model Low Energy and Carbon Code. We're not saying this is the specific BPS that everyone needs to adopt. Rather, it identifies the policy framework and pathway for local governments to meet the vision. And by that, I mean, our real hope is that through our work, everyone is going to adopt a policy that will address existing buildings, that they will adopt one that addresses the residential sector and maybe one that addresses the commercial sector, and that they're committed to continuing to update their building codes so that they're continuing to prevent emissions from our new construction going forward. And so what we're hoping for is to build buy-in to that policy framework and the commitment to that, and then to identify tiered structure of whereby jurisdictions might start with a benchmarking policy or a residential transparency policy before ratcheting those up to, including, performance standards or other pathways to improve the performance of those buildings over time. And that way, we're trying to accommodate, jurisdictions that are at, various different levels across the readiness spectrum, and to accommodate those jurisdictions that are going to push ahead on some of their policies while ensuring that we meet the needs of the region and the communities within it. So all of that policy development work is going to be happening over the course of this year through the BPC. But the policy framework we identified is what I talked about just briefly before. We want everyone to adopt building codes for new construction that improve energy efficiency and expand access to electric equipment and appliances. We want all of our jurisdictions to commit to establishing policies for existing buildings that support sort of the energy use transparency, such as home energy score policies for residential buildings and benchmarking policies for commercial buildings. And then we want to everyone to commit to establishing policies for existing buildings that support incremental building improvements over time, such as performance and equipment standards. Our priorities within the roadmap are clear. It's affordability, it's clean air, improved quality of life, and resiliency. And the timeline is, right now, we're finalizing the draft of our roadmap. And we're going to bring it to the Powerhead Colorado committees and the DRCOG board for review and approval in the coming months. So that is my much shorter presentation on the roadmap, but happy to answer any questions about that.
Thanks, Greg. Any thoughts, questions? Are you all out there?
Yeah, we're still here.
Great. Okay, well, I will assume silence is fantastic job, Greg, and we will move on to agenda item number 6 with Mac covering incentives, advising, and the innovation program, attachment D. Thanks, Greg. Great presentations.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Technical Committee. This is Mac here. I'm buying some time while I get my slides for you. There we go. This morning, we're going to give you all really just an update on incentives and advising programs and our innovation grants. We talked about all of these program areas at past meetings, and there's a lot of work streams going on. So we kind of recognize you all are popping in and out of a lot of different decisions and programs. And the goal here is really to keep you all up to date and identify if anybody wants to have maybe a follow-up conversation or dig a little deeper while we're working on these programs. So we'll start with incentives and advising. And just a little reminder, some table setting. This is our $59.6 million program area. That budget covers incentives for equipment like cold climate heat pumps. It covers the time for human energy advising, supporting building owners and homeowners. And it also covers that administration of the program and design of the program by Vermont Energy Investment Corporation, our vendor. That's VEIC. They're supported by Brindle Group, who are serving as their local partners for engagement and on-the-ground support, and Group 14 Engineering, really bringing their technical expertise and quality installation verification to the program to make sure we're supporting contractors and verifying that equipment is designed and installed in the right way. This was kicked off just before Q4 of 2025. And to give you all a little snapshot of where we are today, here's our simplified timeline. So as you can see, we are right in the middle of our detailed program design. We're working with our partners at VEIC to really dig into the nitty-gritty of each incentive measure. And they're supporting us with that technical expertise. Our target for having everything buttoned up internally is March 31st, which puts us at a Q2 launch for some of these incentives in the market. We don't anticipate that they're going to all release at one moment. We'll probably stagger some of them and release over time. And of course, we'll come back to this group and communicate those public launch dates well in advance. But internally, we're working towards that end of March to make sure all of the systems design and everything is in place and ready to turn on. To get a little bit deeper into the design and give you all an update of the work in process, we have a few different modes of incentive that we're exploring and balancing with VEIC right now. So again, the goal of this program is to help buy down that differential cost between a traditional gas furnace and AC system and that more high efficiency all-electric cold climate heat pump option. That approach also applies to heat pump water heaters compared to that gas storage water heater alternative, and rooftop units, which are either dual fuel or all electric for commercial buildings. And we're exploring other technologies and systems kind of to prioritize and phase within this program. Those technologies I've mentioned are the focus right now. And those are really ones that are going to scale across the whole region for common building types. The types or modes of incentives that we're looking at right now are an incentive direct to the end customer, which also would be assignable to a contractor working on the project. We're calling that our downstream incentive. This is really something that we can target in particular areas And later in the program design will allow us to work with more complex custom projects. So think, as Greg said, more of the pilot type projects, complex commercial systems, things that are not as easily fit into a prescriptive incentive bucket. To complement that downstream, we'll also be working on a contractor directed bonus, something to really support all the soft cost, the administrative work for contractors to go through proper sizing and commissioning and submit that information to our team for review. So this is something that's going to help make sure that the customer has a great experience and complement that quality install verification we mentioned. And finally, I think one of the more important modes is a midstream program, meaning an incentive directed to a distributor. I know we've talked about this really briefly in the past, but when you think about that value chain of getting an HVAC project done, equipment is manufactured, a distributor stocks it locally and then sells, say, that water heater to a contractor who then installs it in someone's home or building. Working with those distributors who are kind of in the middle of that supply chain really helps us make sure that the right equipment is stocked. It puts more of our incentive dollars further upstream in that supply chain and multiplies the effect for the customer. And it allows us to develop some of those relationships with those folks who are training and maintaining relationships with the contractors in the region. So that's a very important part of the program. We're deep into the design there, starting to do outreach to some distributors and manufacturers reps. And important here also is that we're going to be coordinating with Xcel Energy and some of the other utilities like PRPA, Tri-State, and Colorado Springs, who have tried different midstream approaches over the past couple years. There's an opportunity here, especially for heat pump water heaters, if these programs are aligned, to really make Colorado a market that brings in more support from manufacturers. And that's another reason this is a really high value area for us to work in. That's all going to be supported by that human touch of energy advising. Again, the philosophy here is no wrong door, which really means that whoever comes to our program, we're going to try our level best to get them to the resources they need. That person might come in through an email. They might be directly connected to an energy advisor. They might be on the Western Slope, but we want to make sure that those people are directed and have can make the most of all the resources basically available to them. Again, that coordination with our local partners is very important to this program. And we're thinking about this with a tiered approach. So, I've called the first tier Tier 0 because I'm a math nerd, but that basically means anyone has access to our website. We're working on educational content. There's already some up there, and it's kind of constantly evolving. We'll be adding to that as we go. And then moving on from there, we do have that human energy advisor support. Tier 1 being just a simple question. Maybe you're replacing a water heater and you want a little bit of help planning that process. Tier 2, moving up from there, are more complex projects. Think whole home retrofits, longer time scale, more complexity. And at that Tier 2, we have the ability to bring in some technical experts from VEIC to help evaluate projects. At the highest level of support, Tier 3, we bring in more engineering and technical support. These are really complicated, longer timescale projects, and we have the ability to do on-site, in-person walkthroughs of buildings and kind of bring that support to the building and to the system. It's important to say, from the customer experience, they might not so much know that they're going through different tiers. We want this to just be a really seamless experience where we're triaging and giving people support they need. We're just describing this to you all kind of from the program management perspective. It's important to how we resource and budget and think about the program. but from the customer side, it should be a pretty seamless experience. Let's see. Also, really exciting to update you all that we actually have 2 human energy advisors already on board. They are both VEIC staff. They're both based in Colorado, and they're both currently working for Efficiency Vermont program. So they're kind of getting some on-the-job training with Vermont programs, and very soon they'll be transitioning over full-time to Powerhead, Colorado. I think that's awesome to have 2 folks who are local in the state here working with VEIC and really have access to that bench of technical experts. So this is a program area we are really trying to push quickly and launch a little bit even in advance of that incentive launch, because we're starting to get those emails and inquiries from press, and we want to be able to resource our customers and our community better. For this committee, and eventually for the board of DRCOG, we want to put a few things on your radar for this program. As I mentioned, right now, the EIC is leading that engagement. That looks like one-on-one interviews, some focus groups. I want to provide some shout outs to Jeff Wong from Lakewood for being very engaged in that with us and kind of leading the charge. Denver, Jeff Terrell and team. And then Boulder, Zach Swank and team have really been helping us with input on the programs they've been running for a number of years. And we appreciate that engagement, as well as a number of other folks. If you're in this group and you're interested in any of those incentive areas, if you're interested in one technology, say you have some expertise in heat pump water heaters, or you just like to give a little bit more feedback to us, this is a really great time to get in touch. We'd be happy to schedule a one-on-one, get some feedback over email, or kind of work with you to get your feedback on the program where it fits in the schedule before launch. So encourage anyone to reach out directly after the meeting. Of course, we can talk and answer questions today as well. As a next step for us internal to DRCOG, we're going to be reviewing the more detailed incentive design from VEIC, really getting into the equipment specifications, incentive amounts, and the balance of dollars across that whole portfolio. And that is what's going to help inform a policy that will be coming to this group and to the DRCOG board for approval. That basically sets the guardrails for the program, the goals, KPIs, and also kind of outlines what staff and our vendors have latitude to adjust over the course of that program. So we anticipate that coming to you all in a couple months, of course, prior to that public launch, and that'll have all of the detail that we need to get this program moving. And I can pause if folks have questions there. If not, I'll keep going. Okay, I'll keep going. A quick update on our innovation program. And just a reminder, this is a program we talked about at the last meeting and actually a few committee meetings previously, and got input from this group. This is a $6 million program also administered and run by VEIC. Oh, I do see a hand, sorry.
Sorry, Mac. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Hey, Steve.
Hey, could you expand a little bit on the distributors kind of program, I guess, and what you're thinking in terms of so providing that support? What I guess you mentioned manufacturers reps, you mentioned some other folks. And I like the idea because actually at the core of it, distribution does control a significant part of the market. Absolutely. So I like this idea. I would like to kind of understand how you're talking about utilizing that distribution. And this is honestly the first time I've kind of seen something like this inside of a government program in terms of going after actually the most, it can be argued the most important chain in the wheel because distributors control pricing at the core. So, and they also control who they give pricing to, um, and who they support. Technically, as well as administratively. So I love where you're going here. I would love to see how you're thinking about attacking that middle tier and utilizing it to benefit not only the manufacturers, but also, of course, the customer, but also the contractors, and how you set up those incentives in those tiers. That's really, really critical if you're going to going after that middle tier.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Steve. I think that's, of course, spot on feedback. A little bit more in that area of the program. We are drawing on some program design and best practices from Efficiency Vermont and a few other places, but VEIC administers that Efficiency Vermont program, which has a significant element of midstream incentive going to the distributor. So that's where some of the design and inspiration for that is coming from their side. At at a glance, the idea, I think you described it well, is to work with the distributor for a subset of targeted equipment and for equipment that's installed in the DRCOG area that meets the specifications for efficiency. We would help essentially direct an incentive to the distributor so that they can set that price lower when an installing contractor comes to buy, say, a heat pump water heater from the supply house. That's there's a lot of nuance there. So that's what I'm learning from VEIC. I think, as you suggested, that a lot of the nuance is making sure that something works for the distributor and for the contractors that are buying that equipment, making sure we're getting the right information, and those benefits are flowing down. So I think we would probably love to have a one-on-one conversation with you and the VEIC team if we want to get into it more in depth. I'd be happy to set that up. But is that
Yeah,
responsive at a high level?
yeah, no, and I guess that's where I'm going because it is highly nuanced. I mean, you've got kickbacks, there are a ton of games played at that level, um, that no one is usually privy to. And when you're setting up programs, especially at the government level, people are not aware of exactly how these things get done within that distribution chain. So I I would love to be a part of this. I saw on your other slide, you said if anybody wanted to chime in or volunteer, I would love to be a part of that.
Thank you. I will follow up with you directly if that's all right.
Yep, sounds great. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, I'll pivot back to our innovation pilot program. This is a $6 million effort. And thank you, Steve, by the way, for the question and the input. I think I'm fine with anyone raising a hand or butting in as we go here, of course. This as just a point of differentiation, this is a grant program, this innovation pilot grant, but this is separate from the grant Greg was describing, which is going to local jurisdictions, municipalities, and their staff. This grant program is really for industry and community-based organizations to test new approaches, new technologies, new innovations, and reach new customers. So we did get input from this group at the last meeting and a few prior meetings. So this is more of a completion of that feedback loop for your all's awareness. Another snapshot of timeline for this grant. We've really taken the input you all gave us to solidify the 3 focus tracks for the first round of funding. I'll talk more about each of those in a moment. And we're still in the middle of program design with the EIC's team supporting all of the little details of this program. So policies and procedures, the review process, all of the things that are actually going to allow them to deliver these dollars and implement these grants. That's in process, and we're targeting a Q2 release of the first round of funding. So again, we'll see those policies come back to this committee prior to that release. The 3 tracks that were kind of designed based on the input from this group and others are listed on the slide there. The first is reducing market friction and soft cost. And really the challenge statement here is, how might we make decarbonization faster, easier, and more affordable in the region? This is the kind of core of what we want to do here. We might fund some projects like standardized delivery and outreach that are geographically specific. If you think back to some of those example projects we talked about, the emergency replacement of heat pump water heaters, that might fit in this category. Track 2, technical and grid optimization. This is about how we might support efficient and affordable electrification that benefits the customer and the system. So something thinking about maybe smart switching, smart panels, and the implementation of those in a cold climate like Front Range, Colorado, making sure that these projects are implemented smoothly and benefit the grid. And then track 3 is community-based design, accessibility, and health. And this one is really focused on getting access for more people into either programs that already exist or finding ways to deliver these type of technologies really focused on community need and health. We'll have more information on those as we kind of develop the solicitation documents, but this is really a direct outcome from feedback from this group. If this feels like we've missed something from your feedback, or maybe I just didn't speak to it, please let me know. We can either follow up with some more detail here, or we do still have some time to make adjustments before we finalize the solicitation documents. And that is all for me today. Of course, Luke Charbonneau is our Senior Program Specialist on Incentives and Energy Advising. He's out of the office today, but you can reach out to Luke or myself, and Steve will plan to just follow up directly with you and have that follow-up conversation.
Thank you, Mac. Appreciate it. Any questions about this presentation on advising and the innovation program incentives? Well, it's been an exciting week, and I know I was asking Chris and team earlier about the press about the launch, and I am curious, are you getting traction? Are you getting calls? Like, are these advisors being used yet, or am I just too excited? Maybe a quick just update about the week. I mean, I think it's sort of the elephant in the room. I would love to have you all share about some of the press you've gotten and the launch.
Maybe I'll kick things off real quick, just in case folks have not seen the website yet. I'm going to give you a 2-second tour just because we're so proud of how it looks. And so right now it really is, a place to get information about heat pumps, why they work, why you should be interested, how to plan a project. But I think one of the most important parts is there's the Colorado Contractor Hub. So if you don't remember, we kind of branded this differently, both so that we could potentially bring in some other utility partners into this part of the project, which looks like which is going very well. I'll say I can't announce anything yet, but we're really interested in bringing in other utility partners so they can join and kind of learn about how to install heat pumps through training. There's a business scaling program in the direct agents. Hopping back to our site, finding a contractor is really one of the key things you can do right now in this really slick format. So on Adam Sanderson's behalf, I'll look for a contractor that is serving the Longmont area. And you can see that based on an algorithm, these are the ones that popped up. You can see their Google reviews, the types of services they offer, as well as languages spoken, other kind of criteria, whether they offer financing or not. And just because it's a really built out profile, you can go into a contractor and see not only the service area and what types of work they do, but some really cool images of the work they've done. And then when it's time to get in touch with them, we make it super easy to request a consultation. You fill out some really basic information, your email, how you prefer to be contacted, how urgent the request is, and with a touch of a button, you've kind of sent them a ping. It also presents an option to send 2 more contractors the exact same information. So rather than kind of being forced to cold call AAA HVAC off the top of the list, it's a lot easier way, we think, to get connected. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris to just talk a little bit about the media launch.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. Just to add a little bit more info too on the website. The first iteration that Robert just walked you through launched on the 13th of January, and then we're looking forward to the second phase launching in spring when incentives and advising come online. So we have a lot of really good information on there now, a lot of FAQs about heat pumps, some really interesting community profiles, things like that, but it's really going to be a lot beefier come spring when a lot of MAX programs come online. January was a huge month for the marketing and communications aspect of Powerhead Colorado. It wasn't just limited to the website launch. On Monday, the 26th, our whole advertising campaign launched, which was a really big and exciting day for us. If you're active on social media at all, hopefully you've seen some of our paid and organic content on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Also, quite a bit of digital advertising to get things rolling on YouTube, Spotify, SiriusXM, those different channels. But we're really thrilled that you're going to be seeing us on television during the Winter Olympics. So there'll be quite a long list of ad spots that you're going to be able to see. We would love it if you'd ping us when you see one, because it's kind of exciting to see these commercials in the wild. And then it's not going to let up. March Madness will begin. We'll have a big presence from an advertising standpoint during the NCAA tournaments, both men's and women's, leading right into FIFA World Cup, where we'll be advertising a lot on Univision and trying to reach a lot of our Spanish-speaking demographic. So we're really excited about that as well. And then earned media is a big deal for us. And I think GBSM is our public relations consultant on the program. They had such a robust approach to earned media. Robert and I were fortunate enough to participate in quite a few meet and greets, which were technically off the record before the program launched, but just giving some local news outlets a lot of background into the program. And it turned out to be a great strategy because on the day of, we had a lot of great press and really positive media attention from the Post, the Gazette, the Sun, the CBS local affiliate, a number of Spanish-speaking outlets interviewed Fernando Briones, who is our low-income disadvantaged community specialist who reports to MAC, and Denverite and CPR News as well. So just a fantastic assortment of media coverage, and I would say it was 100% positive and just, I think, really getting people excited about what the program has to offer. We've already gotten a lot of questions through the website, a lot of requests for our newsletter, which is going to be starting up in February. So I would say all in all, a tremendous start to the marketing and communication aspect of things. I think Robert and I and the whole team have just been really gratified to see what's gone on in the last couple of weeks. And if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. I think Flo might have something. Flo, do you have something for me?
Well, yeah, I was just kind of curious as to what we're doing if people living outside the DRCOG region respond to this, go on the website, say they're up in Fort Collins or
Mhm.
Greeley or out in Lyman or someplace like that.
Right.
How are we handling those requests?
I mean, it's a great question. Robert and I talk about that quite a bit. I think it kind of runs in parallel with what Mac was mentioning, that kind of no wrong door policy. We're really happy to answer anyone's questions about what they can do regarding beneficial electrification, how they can incorporate that into their homes and businesses wherever they are in Colorado. We are, I think, maybe just somewhat limited as far as some aspects of the program because we are operating largely in the DRCOG region flow, as you know, right now. But when it comes to any information about the benefits of heat pumps, we're going to share that with whomever asks. If anybody from outside of the region wants to subscribe to the newsletter or has questions about the program, we're going to answer those and help them out with that. But Robert, would you like to add on to that at all, or did I cover that?
I think you're good. I will add that, we have continued to kind of explore relationships with utilities, even if they're outside the DRCOG region. There's a real opportunity here for, I think, rather than duplicating similar programs, this is a really unique kind of huge investment in this transition for the region, obviously, but that also presents opportunity to the whole state, and we're willing to serve within the limits of what we can do with our grant. Our EPA officer has kind of given us permission to kind of explore that and use some kind of where it makes sense to just incrementally add some dollars to the rest of the state to serve them. She's given us permission to do that. Obviously, we want to make sure that you all are comfortable with that, as well as our board in general too. But especially if we can start getting some investments from utilities or other sources from outside the DRCOG region, it makes that kind of expansion efforts easier. But in the meantime, I do think we want to kind of partner with utilities so that we understand what programs they are offering, even if they're not in the DRCOG region. So if somebody comes to us, we can direct them to the right place for what programs they might be applicable for.
Great, thanks.
Well, congratulations on all the initial success. Very excited to see what comes next. We are at the close of our meeting.
Did Jeff have a question? I'm sorry,
Let me see.
Susie.
Did Jeff? Sorry about that, Jeff.
No problem. Do I have time for a quick
Of
question for
course.
Chris?
Yeah, absolutely.
Chris, I'm wondering if there are any opportunities for co-branding with local jurisdictions. Oh, my camera's I'm just thinking that a lot of people may not be familiar with DRCOG, but maybe seeing a logo from the city that or town that they live in might help provide some legitimacy to the campaign as well. So just
Yeah.
wondering if you could speak to that opportunity and potential. Thanks.
No, I love that, Jeff, and thanks for reminding me. I meant to bring that up and it just flew right out of my brain. By the end of this week, Karsh Hagen, who is our communications consultant on the program and was responsible for all of our branding and the ad campaign, they are creating a social media toolkit specifically for our comms partners in Lakewood, in North Glen, all throughout the region, where your comms folks can kind of piggyback on what we're doing from a social media aspect and have that opportunity to add your branding to the post so that it really conveys that kind of sense of partnership and adds that local legitimacy, I think, within, region to region. So I think that's going to be a great way to be able to share a lot of that collateral, particularly as it pertains to socials. But Robert, did you have something else that you wanted to add to that?
I did not. But Jeff, just we do want to keep on making that work for you all. So once you see that kit, feel free to provide us feedback what would be most useful. So because we completely agree with your perspective that giving that local legitimacy is huge. I wanted to, before we closed out, give Clay an opportunity to give an update on statewide licensure and just contractor registration and leads really quick.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'll be real quick here. If you hadn't heard, we definitely tried to, let all of our stakeholders know about the state sunrise review. Actually just got the hard copy of it in the mail today. Um, Rejecting our proposal for a statewide license. So you win some, you lose some. Ultimately the comprehensive report is public. They give their justifications on why they didn't feel that our application had sufficient evidence of harm based on lack of statewide licensure. Um, and we gave several instances of how HVAC needs to be more regulated, especially with significant investments like ours coming into the market. There's more risk for heat pump cowboys to enter people's homes without any legitimate training, potentially cause harm to the consumer. But regardless, that was the stance that DORA took, and um, the official process means that there's a 3-year waiting period before another sunrise application can be submitted on this specific occupation. Um, and so that is where we're at. And I appreciate all of the feedback in that process of about 2 years of research we've put into that. It is not going to be a direction we move forward with. Technically, an entity can submit a bill regardless of a sunrise review, but that is not going to be something DRCOG pursues. It wasn't something we ever said we were going to pursue. So that is just an update on that end. Bit of a bummer, but that's how it goes sometimes. And on a lighter,
Yeah, I was
unless
going to say, I'm sure you have more to share there, Clay.
and on a lighter note, to end on, we have through that contractor finder that Robert shared, we have 23 registered contractors and right now on the site. And again, that might seem small compared to other lists that you see that have like 300, 500. Just remember, we are having contractors register themselves, whereas other lists often do like big batching. And so contractors might not even know that they've been added to a list. We want to make sure every contractor on this hub knows that they are registering and has their own information, their own profile, and is, legitimate, still in business, passes our vetting. We've seen that a lot with other lists where contractors aren't in business anymore. They talk people out of heat pumps. And so we're really doing our best to make sure that we're shooting for quality. We want quantity eventually, but quality first and foremost when it comes to who we're sending to people's homes and businesses. So please share with your contractor networks. Our team is happy to do group registrations. If you have a list of or a team of contractors that you want to get signed up, we can do webinars or meet and greets. We have a team of specialists that can help with that registration. And as of last week, Holly, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think of our even smaller number of registered contractors, 9 had already gotten leads just from the small marketing we've done, not small, Chris, but the brief, marketing stint that we've had so far. Nine actual customers already reached out about getting a heat pump consultation, and that's without incentives. That's just pure finding a contractor custom fit to their needs. And so that's super encouraging to me. If we're getting leads without incentives, once we get the Max show rolling, oh my gosh, this is going to just take off and everyone's going to want a heat pump. So, Flo, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Clay. That's disappointing that Dora decided not to pursue HVAC licensure. But since we're allowing contractors to self-regulate, and it does, from your comment, sounds like we are vetting them, so we don't get any of those heat pump cowboys out there, because, does that extend liability to us then in vetting contractors?
No, we do have disclaimer language that both DRCOG and BDC, our vendor, who Holly Harris is on the call here, abide by, which some disclaimer language at the bottom of our contractor finder, which basically just says that, any any business it says power ahead, its employees, affiliates, and vendors assume no responsibility for the performance, quality, safety, operational capacity of a contractor or the equipment or warranty. Basically, this is just connecting you to verified businesses, but we are not retaining any liability as far as the heat pump operating and working. That is all on the business.
Okay.
And I will say they're not totally self-regulating. We are still requiring a verified mechanical license from a jurisdiction. So again, it's just at the jurisdiction level instead of the state level, but we require at least one from within the DRCOG region. So if a business uploads their Denver license to do mechanical work, we verify that and then they're listed, or Centennial or Lakewood, but we are working with the permitting office. This is to show verified license, and we're showing that on their profile so customers can see it too. No lists really check for licensure. It's not something customers really care about. We're trying to make that front of mind to tell customers, go get a licensed contractor. Make sure they're licensed in your jurisdiction to do this work, and trying to create more value around that license that way.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing, Clay. It's really exciting. Any other member comments or other matters that need to be discussed today? Okay. Well, thanks for an amazing meeting. Our next meeting is on March 3rd. So we'll see you then. And yeah, looking forward to continuing to hear all the updates as this program goes live. So thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful
do
rest of your
appreciate
Tuesday.
everything. I do appreciate everything from the Excel side, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. All right, everybody. Have a great Tuesday.